Hi there, Booktube. It's Roz. It's the first weekend in March, so it's time to do a February wrap-up. What were the delights and discoveries and any disappointments of my reading in February? I finished 10 books. I'll touch on all of them, but tell you more about the ones that perhaps were most interesting or I enjoyed the most. And I'm going to start with this one, which is a sort of shiny new release graphic novel. And it's called Your Wish Is My Command. It's by Deena Mohamed. It came out in January. It's actually, that's the English translation that came out in January. She translated it herself from the originals, which she published in 3 volumes in Egypt between about 2015 and 2018, I think. And because this was originally written in Arabic, it's, from my perspective, back to front, like that's not the front, that's the front, and you read it from right to left. That, including, internally, so you have to remember to read the panels from right to left as well. That was mildly discombobulating, to someone who's got deeply ingrained habits of reading from left to right, but not a bad thing, I have to say, because I think it encouraged me to focus on the actual page and what I was seeing. And I always have to make sure when I'm reading comics or graphic fiction, graphic non-fiction, to focus on the images as much as the words, because that comes less naturally to me, but I'm getting there. What an enjoyable book. It's set in a recognisably very real, vibrant, contemporary Cairo. That's where the book's located, and you can absolutely feel that. I mean, I've only visited Cairo briefly, but it took me straight back there. And the characters are people that you could imagine meeting in a Cairo street. But it's actually a fantasy novel, and the fantasy element is that wishes are a thing. They're a commodity, they're mined, they're bought and sold and traded. They have to be regulated. There are first-class wishes that will, can bring you your heart's desire, and third-class wishes that can be positively dangerous or random. She uses that fantasy element as a way to write a story that's creative and imaginative and fun, but also allows her to look at Egyptian society, the sort of last sort of 60, 70 years of Egyptian history, inequalities in Egyptian, sort of social groups. There's characters at different sort of levels, different degrees of prosperousness or the opposite. It also goes to ideas around inequalities between Egypt and other parts of the world, and particularly with the global north, but without any compromise on plot and character. It's not heavy-handed, and it's a little on the long side, but that would be my only sort of criticism of it as a graphic novel. I thought it was really good. Another book I read that looks at some of the inequalities between the global north and the global south was A Bigger Picture by Vanessa Nakate. She's a young Ugandan climate activist. Book came out in 2021. It's kind of somewhere between a memoir and a manifesto, I suppose. And I came to read it because of the Book Naturalists book club that Heidi and Doris organise. And it's probably the most inspiring thing that I read in February. It's a bit, I don't want to be churlish, it's a bit earnest, and it's not, in terms of style, it's not sparkling prose, but the things that Nakate is talking about are so important, and such key ideas, particularly making us remember that the climate emergency has by far its greatest impact in the global south, who are the least responsible for it, being an issue, for the damage that's been done, over the past, couple hundred years that are leading to the climate emergency, and but also that voices about that from the global south are often not so much heard and not so much recognised as those from the global north. And that was specifically something that happened to Nakate herself when she was sort of sliced out of a photo of young climate activists. And that's the sort of one of the, that's why the book's called A Bigger Picture. Well worth reading. I wasn't really, I guess, the target audience for the book. I would say that Nakate is addressing particularly probably other people in their younger people, and it's a bit of a call to action for her generation and under, and all pat her elbow, and it was definitely worth reading. Another thing that I read in February because of being part of a group read along sort of event thing, was that I'm taking part in the year-long EM Forster reading group, kind of organised by Jen the librarian. And what she suggested is that she wanted to read all of Forster's work or novels in publication order, one every 2 months over the course of the year, and then the intervening months maybe sort of throw on some other sort of Forster related reading. It's not too late to join in because we've only actually read one novel, and you may have read some of Forster already, and just fancy dipping in and out to pick up one or two in the course of the year. So I'll leave details below. But the February prompt, as it were, was to read some of Forster's shorter work. So one or more of his short stories or a novella or whatever. And I read The Machine Stops, which is a novella that he brought out in 1909. And, well, if A Bigger Picture was the most inspiring book of the year, book of the month for me, this was the most surprising. It really was, because it's science fiction, and honestly, if I'd come to it not knowing it was by E.M. Forster, and you told me that it was written, in 10 years ago rather than 110 years ago, I would have believed you. It's very fresh and very quite prescient, and some of the ideas in that sort of science fiction is great sometimes for exploring ideas, isn't it? And some of the ideas are still really resonate today. And I didn't even know Forster wrote any science fiction, so all round surprising, and I'm glad I was, I would never have read it if it hadn't been for the Forster read along. But if you're a science fiction reader, I would definitely recommend it. Sorry about the changing light here. Amazingly, the sun is coming out, which is really nice, but it means that I've now got I'll be a bit weirdly highlighted, but not to worry, we'll carry on. So that was the most surprising read. The oddest thing I read this month was this. Okay. The Epic of Askia, Mohammed, recounted by Nouhou Malio and edited and translated by Thomas Hale, with various sort of help from various others. This is a book from Niger, and I read it because, I'm doing my scallywandling thing of trying to read things by authors from all the countries in the world, and finding something to read from Niger is a bit of a challenge. And I was really pleased to find this and really pleased to get hold of it and read it. But what it is it's basically a transcription of an oral performance of an epic, an epic story. It's based on a real character, a leader of the Songhai Empire from the sort of end of the 15th, beginning of the 16th century, Askia Mohammed. but he's now sort of mythologized in the epic, I suppose, as happens with oral history. If I show you what it looks like on the page, you'll see it. It's not a sort of straightforward read. It's not. It's not been. How would you say? Sort of adapted and rewritten to be more accessible or more coherent. It is literally an attempt to transcribe what Nouhou Malio performed. So they recorded it and then. So this is not a book I'm going to recommend to anyone else to read unless you really, really want to read something from Niger, or you're really interested in oral history and oral epics, or you've got a particular interest in the history of that part of sort of northwest Africa. In which case you'll get a lot out of it, as I did. But it's not for everyone, to be fair. So, although it wasn't the best read of the month, I wasn't disappointed. I knew what I was getting into, and actually I enjoyed it. I did have a surprise disappointment this month, though. Very surprising, and not hugely, but distinctly disappointing. Now, if you saw my wrap-up of my best books of 2022, you'll have seen me enthuse about this one. Leonora Miano's Season of the Shadow, which I thought was an exceptional novel. So when Sean the Book Maniac said he'd seen that there was a new translation out of one of her novels, this one, Twilight of Torment, that came out in English last autumn, he and I eagerly agreed to both get hold of it and do it as a buddy read. Now, if you follow Sean's channel, Sean the Book Maniac, which I'm sure if you're here, you probably, I'm sure you do, because he's got lots more subscribers than I have, and there's probably a lot of overlap in the kind of things that we read and talk about. So you will know that Sean is the Empress of bailing, yeah. And did he bail on this one? Yes, he did. And do I blame him? No, I don't. I'm glad that I read all of this book, but I might have been tempted, possibly, if I was the bailing type, to abandon it too. Why? The pretext or premise of the book, rather, is appealed to me. It's the voices of 4 different women. They get a section each, and each of them they're talking to a man, the same man, the son of one, the ex-lover of another, the brother of another, and I like a book that has that sort of structure. That interests me, and it's in set in an over 24 hours in a big sort of storm, in a sort of unnamed country, but that is presumably based on Cameroon, where Miano comes from originally. But, well, Miano is a formidable intellect, I think, and probably a formidable woman. And she, I think, came to this book with a particular set of ideas and issues that she wanted to explore in this novel, which is one of her sort of mature works. And me, I like a book with a lot of ideas. That's not a turn off for me. But it felt like the 4 characters, the 4 women in this book, it in a way they were built around how they could illustrate the things that Miano wanted to say, rather than really having fully having a life of their own. Some of them were stronger than others, but that was the disappointment of the book for me. I mean, it wasn't a bad read, but it's part 1 of a two-part novel, and I won't be looking, I think, for part 2. So yeah, an unexpected disappointment. What about surprise success? Yeah, that's more fun, isn't it? So I decided to read, the library had it, and Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow by Gabrielle Zevin. And it's a novel that came out in 2021, and I'd seen some very enthusiastic reviews of it as a book, but I was really worried that I might not be the right kind of demographic for the book. And so I approached it with a degree of trepidation. Why? Because the protagonists are a group of young video game designers and producers. And so, you can see why I might have thought, oh, will that be a book for us? Will I be interested in that? Well, I shouldn't have worried, because two reasons, really. One is it's a book about characters and relationships and people, and whatever setting that's in, that's always interesting. But also, I should remember that one of the things that I like getting from my reading is a chance to explore experiences and cultures and places and worlds that aren't my own experience. So actually, I was really intrigued and enthused by discovering the world of video game design. There you go. You just never know, do you? I thought Zevin was a good writer. I liked the style. I liked the way it hopped back and forth in time. I was frustrated sometimes about how badly the characters communicated with each other, but I understood that was kind of like the point of the book, really, that their failed communication often and how that affected their relationships with each other. The other thing that I liked about the book was that one of the main characters is disabled, but that's not kind of an afterthought token thing. It's really central to their character and to their experience, in a way, the way that it should be. And it's not used as a plot device, nor sometimes, how disability is used as, or neurodivergence, as a kind of a shortcut to avoid, properly characterizing, one of the people in a book, or to sort of imply certain things about them or whatever. No, doesn't do that. And so, I really appreciated that. But I'd be interested in the perspective of a disabled reader about that, and whether they feel that Zevin kind of pulled that off successfully. But it worked for me, and I was pleased by that element, I suppose. Well, another really, really enjoyable, even more enjoyable, I would say, novel that I read this month was this one, Indelicacy by Amina Cain. And funnily enough, it was actually Sean that brought me to this one. So, brought me to my disappointment, but brought me to one of my top reads of the month. And because he'd been going on about how much he enjoyed this. I came out in, was it 2020 or 21? It's a relatively recent novel, and he'd been enthusing about it. And I saw it was available, and I thought, I'll give that a go, see if Sean's right on this one. And I just loved this. It's quite an odd book, if I'm honest, but I like odd, because it's set in this indeterminate time and place that's vaguely Victorian, but not necessarily, and could be in South America, or it could be in Central Europe, or it could, you never really know. But what you do know is that, or come to know, is the inner life of the central character. This is a book about where it's character driven rather than plot driven, and which can be a strength for me. And the main character, the woman, is a cleaner in a museum, and a very good, thorough cleaner, but she has this other life of the mind where she's thinking about the pictures in the museum, and then she writes about them, and she's trying to become a writer through writing about paintings. Now, this threw a really enjoyable element into the book for me as a lover of the visual arts, of trying to recognise, could I actually recognise any paintings or painters? Were any of them real? And some of them were, undoubtedly. But again, it's a novel of ideas. But whereas, this was a novel of ideas that was all idea and no character, this is a novel of ideas that's like really based in the character, because it's kind of about writing and the life of the mind and carving out some space for ourselves as women and finding a kind of a intellectual and emotional freedom, but without ever pinning it down really hard. She allows, in a sense, the ideas to stay as indistinct as the place and the time. Read it. Do read it. Yeah, well, as long as you're happy with, a touch odd. The other novel that I absolutely loved this month in February was one that was, in a sense, the opposite, in that it is very strongly rooted in a particular time and place, and that particular time and place is Norfolk in the 15th century. So that's part of England, if you're not from here, East Anglia. And it's based around two real women whose names we know and whose histories we know because they were writers. And, they did carve out some kind of place for themselves and some intellectual and spiritual kind of freedom, which they then reflect in their writing. The two women involved are Julian of Norwich and Margery Kemp. And both of them, in real life, effectively wrote a memoir or autobiography or sort of spiritual memoir in many sort of based almost on based on their visions that they felt they had. And in real life, these two women are known to have met. And Margery Kemp, we know that because Margery Kemp, in her dictated memoirs, talks about that meeting. And the novelist, I should tell you who wrote it, shouldn't I? What was her name? Victoria Mackenzie. She takes that as her jumping off point, that meeting between these two real life women, and then, creates a novel around that is historical fiction at its best, in that, it's centered in not just in the physical environment of, say, 15th century East Anglia, but also the intellectual and spiritual and cultural environment as far as she could manage to convey and recreate that. I thought it was quite special, and it only came out. It's the most recent release that I read, I think, in February. It came out late January. Do look out for it if you've got to be. Again, you've got to be up for something slightly odd, but if you are, it's a gem. Reading that and knowing it was based on the real lives of Julian of Norwich and Margery Kemp led me into one of the other non-fiction books I read this month, because I read Femina by Janina Ramirez, and I'll give you the full title of the book so that you understand more about it. So it's Femina, a new history of the Middle Ages through the women written out of it. And what Ramirez sets out to do is to rebuild, put together kind of like potted biographies, as far as she can, of a series of medieval women. Some we don't know their name, but the earliest ones, it's specific individuals who we've found their grave and can work out things about them from that, through to others who are known historical figures, and those like Hildegard of Bingen or Marjorie Kemp and Julian Norwich, who we know partly through their own writing, and how we can connect with them through that. But Ramirez, doesn't just use historical text. She also uses archaeology. She uses art and objects, whatever sources she can find to unpick and expose the lives of these women. Really, not the most sparkling in style again, but really meatily fascinating as a book of non-fiction. Really enjoyed it. And I like the way Ramirez is very upfront in saying, all history is partial, and this is her chosen partiality, I suppose, is to be looking at taking a fresh look at perhaps a less well-known period of European history through looking particularly at lives of individual women. Funnily enough, the one book of poetry that I finished in this month was also inspired by a non-fiction work and a work of biography, because in January I read, what's the actual title? Super Infinite, that's it, unusual. Super Infinite, which is a biography of John Donne. Came out in 2021. I wanted to read it because the BookTube Prize, it was one of the non-fiction choices, and I just kept hearing people talk about reading it as part of their, BookTube Prize non-fiction groups, and it spoke to me because I'd read the poetry of John Donne when I was doing my English O level, long time ago, and so having read the biography in February, I pulled out the selected poems of John Donne and read all of this. It's just lovely going back to stuff that you studied when you were young and revisiting it, and the different experience that you have of it as with a lifetime in between, but also remembering the joy and excitement that you got from the poems back when you were like 14, 15. Now, I deliberately wound up this wrap up by talking about two works that are kind of about people, and are one that's an individual biography and one that's a sort of series of potted biographies, as a little kind of like, what should we say, teaser or taster, to say, look out for announcement videos from me and Elizabeth of Bouquins and Books in the coming week about a April readathon that's connected with People April, and memoirs, biographies, diaries, journals, letters. Yeah, we'll tell you more.